School staff, what's the strangest found and lost and found object that made everyone uncomfortable? It was a rainy Monday morning when I opened the lost and found bin to catalog items for the week. Most of the stuff was typical sweaters, lunchboxes, a lone sock here and there, but at the bottom of the bin I found a doll that made my stomach turn. Its head was partially completed, made from a roughly carved wooden sphere, with an unsettlingly realistic painted face, but the body was a mess of yarn twine and bits of fabric. Someone had clearly been constructing it, but the craftsmanship made it look disturbingly lifelike. I showed it to the other staff and whispers immediately started circulating. One teacher swore it moved its eyes when you weren't looking. A few students had noticed it too, and one claimed it whispered her name at night in the hallway, though she might have been exaggerating. By lunch, the doll was locked in a supply closet, but stories of its uncanny appearance lingered for months. Nobody knew who had made it or why it was abandoned in Lost and Found. The janitor swore he had never seen anything creepier, and even the principal admitted it was oddly specific for a school project. Rumors about the unfinished doll's origins spread, some claiming it was a cursed art assignment or an experiment in psychological horror, and it became a cautionary tale for new teachers about what could end up in Lost and Found. During a routine inventory of the Lost and Found, one of the aides discovered a stuffed teddy bear missing an arm. At first glance, it looked like a normal toy, but upon closer inspection, the arm was sewn back on with dark thread in a crude, almost ritualistic fashion. The stuffing had been replaced with some odd mixture of sand and rice. The moment we picked it up, the room grew silent, and even the usually hyper students avoided looking at it. Rumors began swirling that it had been used in some sort of occult game or even blackmail. Some staff jokingly dubbed it the Witness. We kept it in the principal's office, and a few people claimed that when you stared at the bear long enough, its eyes seemed to follow you. Weeks later, it mysteriously vanished from the office, only to reappear in the middle of the gym floor during lunch, which caused a minor panic among students who swore it wasn't there the day before. Nobody ever confessed to placing it there, and the legend of the severed teddy grew into a weird school folklore story about lost and found horrors. One day, the Lost and Found yielded a spiral notebook that made every teacher blanch. The cover was tattered, but inside, the pages were stained with what looked like old blood. At first, we thought a student had injured themselves and abandoned it, but there were no reports of any missing students matching the description. The writing inside was chaotic, filled with half-legible names, dates, and bizarre instructions like "feed it at midnight" and "don't let it escape." Some staff tried to sanitize it, but the smell was unmistakably metallic. Nobody wanted to touch it, and it was placed in a sealed plastic bag in the custodial office. When we investigated, the notebook's owner was never found, and the notebook itself mysteriously disappeared a few days later. Stories about it circulated for years, with some claiming they heard faint scratching noises coming from the bag, though that was likely imagination. Still, it made everyone uncomfortable, and the notebook became the lost and found item we don't talk about in faculty meetings. One afternoon, the secretary pulled out a plastic Halloween mask from the Lost and Found. At first it seemed harmless, a simple store-bought skeleton mask, but the moment she held it up, the jaw seemed to move slightly on its own. Teachers swore the eye holes were too realistic, almost human-like, and the mask gave off an odor that smelled like a mixture of mothballs and old sweat. Several students refused to go near it, claiming it stared at them in the locker room last week. Eventually, we moved it to a storage closet and covered it with a tarp, but it became a recurring topic among staff. Some people swore that masks from Lost and Found in that school always returned to the same spot, even after cleaning or being moved. The mask became part of the unofficial Lost and Found Haunted Objects list, alongside a single pink sandal and a moldy lunchbox that smelled like vinegar. Perhaps the strangest item ever found was a small mason jar filled with a thick, murky liquid. No label, no explanation, just a faint smell of decay when we opened the lid. A few brave staff peered in and claimed to see something floating, possibly remnants of plant matter or something else. Students had discovered it sitting on a shelf and dared each other to touch it. The jar's contents seemed to shift slightly if left on the desk for too long. Some teachers jokingly suggested it was a science experiment gone wrong, others whispered about curses. We kept it locked in a filing cabinet, but it developed a reputation. Whoever saw it first thing in the morning would immediately have an off day, spilling coffee, tripping, or forgetting papers. Eventually, the janitor disposed of it without explanation, and nobody knows exactly what it was. Still, for years after, the jar was referenced as the single most unnerving lost and found item anyone had ever discovered in that school. It started as a normal Tuesday morning, cataloging lost and found items, jackets, lunchboxes, a forgotten pair of sneakers. But at the bottom of the bin, I noticed a mannequin head realistic human-sized with glossy brown hair. At first I thought it was part of a school art project. Then I noticed something off. It had been pierced and scratched with pen markings, little etchings all over its face that made it appear angry. One of the teachers joked it looked like it was scowling at us that night. I found myself replaying it in my head, imagining it staring from the corner of the room the next day. It had moved from the storage closet to the center of the teacher's lounge table. No one knew who moved it. Rumors spread that it had been used in some kind of dark ritual by students, though nobody admitted it. It stayed in the lost and found for weeks, and every staff member avoided touching it. Some claimed it followed their gaze, and whispers started calling it the head of judgment. Eventually, we buried it under a pile of old sports equipment to forget about it. But even weeks later, the image of the scowling mannequin haunted new teachers during orientation. One afternoon, the custodian handed me a small box from Lost and Found labeled only with a student's initials. Inside was a taxidermy squirrel, its glassy eyes staring unnervingly at me. The squirrel had a tiny hand-stitched cape, a miniature sword glued to its paw, and a note pinned to its chest that read, "Do not mess with me." Nobody claimed it, and when I asked students, they either laughed or got defensive. Staff were creeped out, whispering that it felt alive. Someone joked it might be a family heirloom, but the way it was dressed suggested otherwise. For days, we found it in different corners of the school, on top of the copier, peeking from the library shelves, and even in the teacher's lounge next to a cup of coffee. No student owned up to moving it. Eventually, it disappeared mysteriously, but the legend of the taxidermy squirrel spread, earning it the nickname Sir Squeaks-a-Lot, guardian of lost and found. New teachers were warned. If you hear tiny squeaky footsteps in the hallway, it's probably him. It was supposed to be a routine check-in of lost and found. Most of the items were mundane, water bottles, hoodies, sneakers, but one leather baseball glove smelled strongly of iron. Upon inspecting, I noticed a dark reddish stain in the palm. My heart sank. It looked like blood. Panic ensued. I called the office and staff debated whether to call authorities. Then a student timidly approached and admitted he had practiced baseball at home and sliced his hand open, forgetting to wash the glove before bringing it to school. The relief was palpable, but the image of the blood-stained glove haunted teachers. It sat in a sealed plastic bag for weeks, and staff dared not touch it without gloves. Every time a student asked about it, teachers gave vague responses and rumors exaggerated it into a story about a cursed glove that caused accidents. Even months later, someone whispered that the glove moved on its own between the library and the gym. Lost and Found once yielded a mason jar full of a greenish, translucent slime. There was no label, and when we opened it, the goo smelled faintly of vinegar and something else indescribable. Some staff dared to touch it with gloves and noticed it was oddly warm and sticky. The students were amused but horrified, claiming it was cursed or from a science experiment that went wrong. Every day, it seemed to slightly expand, and by the end of the week, the jar had a small crack, leaking slime into a tote bag underneath. Nobody claimed it, and we didn't dare dispose of it immediately, fearing parental backlash. Eventually, the janitor bravely threw it out, but the legend lived on. For weeks, students would dare each other to open the Lost and Found, whispering that the slime jar would try to escape or stick to your hand forever. One day, staff found an untouched lunch bag sitting on top of the Lost and Found bin. It was a typical lunch: sandwich, apple, juice box. But when a teacher tried to inspect it, the sandwich had mysteriously been cut into tiny cubes, the apple peeled in spirals, and the juice box punctured, with a straw floating in the air like it had been placed mid-sip. No student claimed the lunch, and no one admitted touching it. Over the next few days, we found more mysterious processed lunches. Oranges sliced into perfect cubes, bagels cut into improbable geometric shapes, yogurt lids removed and resealed. Staff started joking that the lost and found had developed a life of its own. The mystery lunches became a weird source of tension and fascination. No one ever solved it, and the object itself became a legend, the phantom lunch, haunting the lost and found bin for years, and every new student was warned never to leave food unattended there. It was a Wednesday morning, and as the new staff member in charge of Lost and Found, I was doing my routine check, sorting jackets, lunch boxes, water bottles, and the occasional random sock that had wandered off somewhere. Most days were uneventful. Students came and went. Teachers occasionally asked if we'd found a specific item, and everything ran smoothly. But that day at the very bottom of the bin, buried under a pile of mismatched sneakers and forgotten gym clothes, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A small, ornate wooden box, roughly the size of a lunchbox, covered in strange symbols that looked hand-carved. I picked it up carefully, feeling a slight vibration like it was almost alive in my hands. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a single human tooth, not in a bag, not preserved, just sitting there on a small red velvet cushion. I froze for a second, my mind racing. Was it a prank? A Halloween leftover? Or something more sinister? I looked around to see if anyone else had noticed, but the hallways were empty. My first instinct was to call the principal, but I paused. What if it was some kind of science project or dental demonstration gone wrong? I gingerly closed the box and set it on the counter, trying to keep my hands from shaking. By lunchtime, the word had spread. One teacher, curious, asked me about it, and I showed her the box. She went pale, muttering something about voodoo or some ritual nonsense. That was when it hit me. The tooth had small scratches along the enamel, almost like someone had intentionally marked it with symbols. I realized that this wasn't just a lost tooth. It was a crafted object meant to be seen or perhaps feared. Students started whispering. One of the art kids claimed it was part of a creative project involving ancestors and family relics. Another kid suggested it was a Halloween prank that had gone too far. Teachers began avoiding the lost and found entirely, walking past it as though it were contagious. The box somehow seemed to move slightly every time no one was looking, although I couldn't be sure if it was my imagination. By the end of the day, the rumor mill had turned it into a haunted relic, a tooth that could curse anyone who touched it. Supposedly stolen from a long-forgotten janitor's cabinet in the 1970s. The next morning, the box was gone. No one admitted moving it, and the tooth was nowhere to be found. Staff whispered theories all week. Maybe it was stolen, maybe a student had returned it home, maybe it truly had a life of its own. Some of the older teachers insisted it was bad luck to even glance at it. New staff were warned never to touch the lost and found without supervision, because things appear and disappear. Now, the legend of the tooth became part of school folklore whispered in staff meetings, and eventually I began to half expect to see it on my desk with a note saying, "I'm still watching," months later. A freshman found a similar wooden box in the art room closet empty, but marked with the same symbols. When asked where it came from, the kid shrugged and said, "I think it followed me." Nobody believed him entirely, but we quietly moved it back to the lost and found bin, and the cycle started again. Every staff member who encountered the box afterward reported the same uneasy feeling, like it was aware of them. I'll never forget the day a custodian, normally the most stoic person on campus, muttered under his breath, "Some things in Lost and Found aren't meant to be found," and refused to go near the bin for weeks. Eventually, the box and its tooth became more than just an object. They became a story we told new teachers, a cautionary tale about curiosity, the supernatural, and the uncanny horrors lurking behind even the most mundane of school duties. And to this day, every time I open the Lost and Found, I glance at the bottom of the bin, half expecting the little velvet box to be staring back at me, waiting for its next victim. It started as an ordinary Thursday morning in the school's lost and found room. I was going through the usual mess of jackets, hoodies, lunchboxes, and random shoes, trying to sort everything before the bell rang. Most days were boring, predictable, and slightly frustrating, but nothing unusual ever happened. That day, buried under a pile of mismatched sneakers and crumpled sweatshirts, I noticed a small, oddly shaped object wrapped in a faded napkin. Curiosity got the better of me. I carefully unwrapped it, expecting maybe a broken pencil case or a forgotten science project instead. I found what looked like a half-melted candle stuck into the middle of a dirty sock. The candle had strange symbols carved into it, and the sock was soaked in some sticky brown substance that smelled faintly metallic. I froze. My first thought was, okay, probably some weird art project, but my gut told me it was something else. I set it down carefully and continued sorting, but I couldn't stop glancing back. By lunchtime, rumors had started circulating among the staff. Someone had seen me examining it and whispered that it was some kind of occult item. I laughed it off, but inside I was already uneasy. One of the history teachers asked me about it, peering suspiciously at the candle in the sock. "Is it a science experiment?" she asked hesitantly. I shrugged. "I think it's decorative." She frowned. Decorative? That was when I realized nobody had a clue, and the whole staff was slowly getting nervous. By the end of the day, the candle had become a legend. Teachers avoided the lost and found students whispered about it, and one of the janitors refused to enter the room, muttering something about bad energy. Every time someone walked in, the candle seemed to shift slightly, though I swear no one touched it. One student claimed that if you stared at it too long, your stomach would start to hurt, and oddly enough, the next day a freshman complained of nausea in the nurse's office, blaming it on the lost and found candle thing. Weeks passed and the object was never claimed. Nobody admitted to putting it there, and its origin was a mystery. It started moving around mysteriously. One day, it was on top of the bins. The next day, tucked behind a row of forgotten lunchboxes. Teachers reported feeling uneasy when they were near it. One even said that she dreamt about it, and in her dream, it whispered her name. Eventually, the principal called a staff meeting. We all gathered nervously as she announced that we were going to sanitize the lost and found nobody wanted to volunteer to handle it. Finally, I ended up carrying it in a cardboard box to a storage closet where it remained untouched for months. Staff continued to whisper about it. Some swore it was cursed, some said it was haunted, and a few joked that it was an elaborate prank from the senior class. Years later, a substitute teacher found the box while cleaning out the closet and nearly screamed. The candle was gone, but the sock remained, and inexplicably it smelled faintly metallic, as if whatever had been in there left a residue. Some say it was a student prank that went too far. Others maintain it was a genuine artifact of something unexplainable. I, for one, have avoided the lost and found ever since, and whenever a new teacher asks about it, I just shake my head and whisper, "Some things are better left lost." It started with a stench so foul it made my eyes water before I even opened the lost and found door. At first, I thought it was just someone's forgotten Tupperware, the kind that had gone moldy over a summer. But this wasn't ordinary. A lunchbox, one of those old-school metal ones with a cartoon on the front, was emitting a smell that seemed alive, almost aware. When I gingerly opened it, a thick green slime had grown inside, and buried in the slime was a single, shriveled sandwich with something small moving on it. I blinked. A tiny insect or maybe two crawled on the bread in perfect formation, almost like they were marching. I called the janitor, who refused to go near it, and one of the cafeteria staff actually gagged when she saw it. For the next week, the lunchbox became infamous. Students dared each other to open it. Teachers whispered about it like it was radioactive, and one brave soul actually put a new sandwich in it, hoping it would feed the mold and make it leave. Instead, the smell intensified. Eventually, we wrapped it in industrial plastic and put it in the dumpster behind the school. But some claim the smell lingered for months, like it had left a shadow in the lost and found itself. It was a rainy Tuesday when the janitor brought me a small plastic doll head he'd found under the bleachers. At first glance, it looked harmless, a piece of some kid's old toy. But the moment I picked it up, the room got inexplicably colder, and I swear the eyes seemed to follow me. I put it on a shelf in the lost and found, and that's when the weird stuff started. Pens rolled off the shelves, backpacks fell over, and every time someone tried to move the doll head, it seemed impossibly heavy, almost resisting them. Students started reporting nightmares about it, describing a little girl wandering the hallways asking for help. A teacher swore it whispered her name while she sorted papers. Eventually, the head was locked in a filing cabinet labeled "Do Not Touch," and the school nurse refused to enter the room. Somehow, no one claimed it for months, and when it finally disappeared, nobody knew who had taken it. Some staff claimed to see it sitting on the top shelf of the lost and found weeks later, even though it was gone.